Hey yo, football fans, it's another great year. Fantasy football fiends, grab your beer. Giving you the best draft tips for all your picks. Starts and sits to the waiver wire fix. From my drafts galore to stats that's hardcore. Triple F does it all, have y'all screaming more. So sit back, relax, let the experts prevail. JT Magnum, Ziggy Guns never fail.
What is up, Fantasy Football Fiends? My name is Ziggy Guns, along with
JT Magnum.
And it is Week 16, Fantasy Super Bowl week. This week is usually this championship game. There are some leagues where it has a Week 17. All the more importance about this week is, make sure your players are healthy, make sure you're looking at matchups, and don't be afraid to take risks. As you saw last week, a lot of the fantasy stats, a lot of the fantasy leaders, a lot of them were no names last week. Or names that you wouldn't have necessarily thought. Who would have thought that Kendall Wright would have been better than a Calvin Johnson, or who would have thought that an Asiata would be better than a what's his name that everybody was banking on, Ray Rice. It's stuff like that. That's just what happens. A lot of people trust the names more so than these new guys that come in around this time of year. So we'll go ahead and get cracking and talk about it. JT, what we got?
On the waiver wire this week, we have, this is not really a no name, but he's back, and it's Jay Cutler. And he threw a few interceptions, but he did throw, a couple touchdowns as well. He had good fantasy numbers, so to speak, decent fantasy numbers. But I look, if you need a quarterback and you're in a championship game and your quarterback has a bad matchup and you need to pick up some quarterbacks, there's other quarterbacks out there to pick up, like Fitzpatrick going against Jacksonville. There's who else? Who else did we say? Matthew Stafford. A lot of people probably have him. Andy Dalton. There's quarterbacks to be picked up. Matt Castle, who had a good game last week against Philly. Except he's playing Cincinnati, so I wouldn't pick him up. But there's quarterbacks to be picked up, but I wouldn't touch Cutler going against Philly, although Castle had a good game against Philly. It's in Philadelphia, and it probably might be in the snow.
You know what? Cutler, though, is good in cold weather. I think a lot of people forget that cold weather plays a big part of a lot of the fantasy quarterbacks not scoring much. He's always, though, historically been good in cold weather. Obviously, from his days in Denver and now in Chicago, he can play in cold weather, and he's been one of the quarterbacks that can do good. And Philadelphia's been giving up a lot of yards and a lot of throwing yards at that. I mean, Castle had a phenomenal game last week. I think he had 382 yards, and they absolutely destroyed Philadelphia. Now, granted, that was in their place, no elements. If it's snowing real heavy, we have to assume that Matt Forte is going to get the bulk of it. But I wouldn't be surprised, though, especially with Cutler back, that they'd be throwing a lot of screen passes to create a running game through the air. And that, in turn, might be real good for Cutler. And also, Cutler is for sure going to be using his big targets, Jeffrey and Marshall, in the end zone or in the red zone. So I expect Cutler to have a big game, actually, more so than some of these other big-name quarterbacks. Like you might say, I think one of your duds this week's going to be Drew Brees. I wouldn't be surprised if Cutler has a better fantasy day than him. But we'll see.
Yep.
Who else we got?
For running backs, just one this week, Matt Asiata. We don't know if he's playing. We don't know if Peterson's going to be in or if Gerhardt's going to be in. As far as the Peterson injury, they might hold him out for the rest of the year just to, keep him healthy. They know they ain't making the playoffs. So, you might see Matt Asiata playing the whole game, and Gerhardt, they might hold him out as well because obviously they're not making the playoffs. So might as well let the young kids play. And he scored 3 touchdowns last week. And they're playing against Cincinnati. It's a little bit tougher run defense, but they also pretty banged up on the defensive line as well. So, and they're in Cincinnati, another cold weather game. So usually in these cold weather games, people run the football a lot. So we'll see what happens, but pay attention to the lineups, pay attention to everything that's going on, and make sure if Peterson and Gerhardt are out, then he might be a good one to put in if you don't have a good running back matchup.
Oh yeah, definitely. We don't know. It's up in the air. Like this is the part that we're talking about. I mean, who would have thought if you're in your championship game and you had Adrian Peterson, that all of a sudden he's not going to be a factor, and your number one overall pick might not be there for you. And this is the moves that make or break a championship team here. So certainly keep an eye on it. We know I think it might be safe to say Peterson is not going to play. I would be surprised because, like you said, out of the playoffs already. So what's the point of risking your high-profile, you know, face of the franchise guy for one game, last two games? Because I think this was around the time when he did hurt his knee, right? And wasn't it the last game? It was almost the
Yeah.
same situation. But of course, it was more. He was fighting for a playoff at that time, but still, it would be surprising. So keep an eye on it. Now, if Gerhardt plays, you probably want to pick him up over because they'll probably definitely play him more. But if Asiata is going to be the only one out there, and like you said, they're going to let him all play. He took 30 touches, 33 or 30 carries, 33 touches overall. So they're definitely going to give this guy a lot of chances to run. So he was a very good pickup if everything turns out.
And like I said, if you don't have a good matchup and you can't get a Matt Asiata, there's other options. There's D'Angelo Williams. There's Andre Ellington. Some leagues have Mike Tolbert still available. Daniel Thomas. Like there's people to pick up. Daniel Thomas has a pretty interesting matchup against Buffalo. Mike Tolbert against New Orleans. A lot of people don't pick him up because he's not really their feature back. D'Angelo Williams probably will be. And if you can't get a D'Angelo Williams because somebody's held on to him all year, then you might be able to pick up a Tolbert who's the goal line back. Andre Ellington, who just came off an injury, he's backing up. What's his face? I can't even think of his name now. He's backing up. What's his name from the old Pittsburgh Steeler?
Rashad Mendenhall.
Mendenhall. I drew a blank there, but he's backing up Rashad Mendenhall. But Andre Ellington has shown explosiveness. Like he makes explosive plays, and they're playing Seattle. They're going to need explosive plays this week. Do I think he's going to get it? Maybe not, but he might help you fantasy wise if you're going to get a 0. So
another guy to really keep an eye on too is Jordan Todman for Jacksonville. We saw what he did when Maurice Jones-Drew went out. If Maurice Jones-Drew is not going to play again, because there's another situation right there, he might not even want to play because he's playing for a contract. It looks like after this year anyway. So if he's out, here's a guy that's going to probably get a bulk of the carry against the Titans.
Yep. And for wide receivers, this week we're going to talk about Greg Jennings, who finally decided to show up to play. It's like his second great game of the year. That's it so far. So
he's been like that even with Green Bay, in my opinion. He had that one year, and every year he's been a disappointment, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's guys to look at, but given the matchup this week, Minnesota plays Cincinnati. I don't like Jennings' matchup this week against those corners. But there's other guys to pick up. There's Jericho Cotchery. There's Golden Tate from Seattle or Doug Baldwin. I look for Golden Tate to be in wraps because Peterson's going to be on him all day for Arizona. So look for Baldwin to actually do some work this week. He's the other receiver. Ruben Randall against Detroit. I mean, there's guys that you can pick up. That will help.
Yeah, Marvin Jones, he's been scoring touchdowns lately for Cincinnati, and he's going up against Minnesota, who gives up a lot of yards. We saw that with Nick Foles. So, yeah, a lot of wide receivers out there. Don't be afraid of. I mean, like I said, we got to stress it since it's this is it right here. This is for all the marbles. We can't stress enough. Don't be afraid to not play. A guy like, let's say, Colston against Carolina. He might get shut out. So don't be afraid to bench him. If you were banking on Harry Douglas to being the guy and he's going up against San Francisco, don't be afraid to pick up somebody else instead, because it's better to just take the chance on somebody that you feel is going to be better because of the matchup than somebody you hope is going to be better when their matchup is bad.
Yep. Pay attention to what the stats are too. Pay attention to what that team that they're playing gives up offensively. They're playing a team like Dallas who gives up like 500 yards a game to receivers. Put in a second receiver if you have to for next going against Dallas. Like, just check out the matchups, check out the team gives up defensively, and try to insert players in that way. That's how I kind of do it. So
yeah, that's how I did too. That's the reason why our teams have gone far. We certainly. In your fantasy football league, you drafted like every best receiver. That helped you all the way.
Yeah. And then I made the trade for the playoffs because I knew my receivers carried me to an undefeated record to start. And then I started trading players because I knew that if I trade receivers, people were going to jump on them and they did, and I got running backs and quarterbacks in return that completed my team, and boom, there you go, 14-1 in the championship game.
There you go.
That's how it
Yeah.
happened. But you gotta kind of know how to work the system. You gotta look at the players that you're gonna trade and see their matchups later on. And if they have good matchups later on for week 15 and 16, why would you trade them? If you know you're gonna make the playoffs. So that's what I kind of
Exactly.
did. And I traded for players that I felt were gonna do good in the playoff weeks. But moving on, the tight ends. We're gonna talk about Timothy Wright. I don't think we've talked about him at all for some reason this year. I don't remember really
No.
talking about him other than mentioning him. But he scored a touchdown last week against San Fran. He did good, like kind of like garbage points a little bit, but he did do well. Tight ends have never pretty much done well against San Fran, so that's a plus. And he's very fast. He's a good catching tight end. So if you have a chance to pick him up and your tight end doesn't have a good matchup, or you just don't have a good tight end in the championship game, pick up Timothy Wright. I mean, who's Tampa Bay playing? They're going against St. Louis. St. Louis has not defended tight ends at all this year, I believe. So pick them up.
Yep.
They don't have really good linebackers or safeties to cover tight ends. And Mike
Some
Glennon
other
likes
tight
Timothy Wright a
ends.
lot.
Some other tight ends you might want to look at, Pitta, stuff like that. We mentioned them last week.
Yep.
Certainly these guys that Heath Miller, some of the guys that no one's really paying attention to that are out there. These guys are going to be integral, especially in cold weather games, snow games, stuff like that, because they're not going to be going for the deep ball. They're going to be looking a lot closer, trying to convert short yardage, things of that nature. So tight ends
Yeah.
play a big role in the winter.
Delaney Walker. If you didn't pick up Delaney Walker, if he's available in your league, and people didn't like either drop them because or whatever, pick him up. Garrett Graham against Denver. Tight ends do really good against Denver. Pick up Garrett Graham. He's another one. A lot of people might have not held on to him. Some people, if you did drop Jordan Cameron, you're crazy. I don't know why you would drop him, but I did in my league. But I had Vernon Davis, so there's the switch there. And Cameron actually carried me early against those good games when Davis I knew wasn't going to do well. And that's another thing right there. I started Cameron over Davis, who's a stud, but I
Yep.
was not scared to do it. But I benched Cameron at the right times as well. So that's kind of what you can do. Zach Ertz is another one to pick up. He scored another
Yep.
touchdown last week. Even Michelle Rivera, who's going against Michael Rivera, actually his name is, but it's spelled weird. It's spelled like Michelle. I call him Michelle, sorry. Michael Rivera from Oakland. He's going against San Diego. He scored a touchdown last week as well, and San Diego's defense is not the greatest. So there's
Exactly.
all these tight ends you can pick up, and if you don't have good matchups, and check the stats on what the team gives up offensively and try to insert them. Now
Yep.
for defense this week, not going to talk too much about it. We're just going to talk about one team, and that's the Browns. And they're doing really well. Not a lot of teams own them. They scored two defensive touchdowns last week. They are actually pretty solid on defense. And who are they playing? Turnover prone Geno Smith. So
Yep.
there is a really good matchup there. Even if it is in New York, there's potential there to maybe the Jets might score some points, but at the same time, so might the Browns on defense. So they have a really good corner too in Joe Hayden. So he pretty much locks up one side of the field, and
And the
I
Jets have no receivers. So,
yeah, exactly. So I'm telling
that's
you
going
right
to be a
now,
nightmare for
Cleveland might
Smith.
be the
Yep.
best pickup this week for your fantasy lives. It might actually win you
Yep.
the championship game this week. So that's it with the waiver wire. So
Studs, duds, and Papa's.
yep, stud, duds, and Papa Signs. Who's your stud?
Stud of the week's got to be LaShawn McCoy. I mean, we saw that Philadelphia's offense, with the Chip Kelly we've talked about in the beginning of the year has been good. Starting with Nick Foles, it seemed like LaShawn McCoy was kind of the forgotten guy, but they've been using him a lot lately, especially the last couple of weeks. And, of course, he has that dream matchup against the Chicago Bears, which obviously we know has not been able to stop the run pretty much all season long. And at home in Philadelphia, where it might snow. Remember, last time it snowed there a couple weeks ago, he had, 200
200
yards?
yards. Yeah.
Woo. And now imagine if he was playing the Bears that day. How many yards he could have had. So
He might have broken an NFL record.
exactly. This has the potential for LaShawn McCoy to have just a huge, huge game. And I mean, off the charts rushing yards, maybe 2, 3 touchdowns. Who knows? We saw what Jamal Charles did this past week. I mean, he might even be able to have that kind of game if it snows. And hopefully it snows now. I want to snow.
Yeah. My stud is going to be Phillip Rivers. You saw what Alex Smith did to the Oakland Raiders last week, and if Alex Smith can do that with with Kansas City, and if Alex Smith can do that to the Raiders, then what do you think Phillip Rivers is going to do to the Raiders? So their defense has just been atrocious. They're hurt on defense at cornerback. I think like 2 or 3 of their corners are down. That explains why Alex Smith was able to do what he did, throwing just screen passes. But Phillip Rivers, of course, with Keenan Allen and Eddie Royal and Antonio Gates, I look for Phillip Rivers to probably have a good 4 or 5 touchdown passing game. So if you don't have him, if he's for some reason on the waiver wire, pick him up, but I doubt it. But definitely start him this week. Who's your dud?
My dud is going to be Shane Vereen. We starting to see that maybe what's his name is out of the doghouse now. Stephen Ridley is starting to get back into. The thing that I don't like is that Vereen comes off this huge game where he had 150 yards receiving. It looks like he's the reason why the Patriots are able to move the ball smoothly, and then you have all of a sudden they decide not to use him. I mean, I can't stand whenever Bill does something like that. It's
because teams key on him the next game, so he anticipates teams keying on him, and he inserts somebody else to throw them off. That's been Bill Belichick. That's what he does every week.
I know. It's so ridiculous. But anyway, since Ridley got more carries, it's going to look like it's going to be back to being you don't know who it's going to be the guy. And Vereen has never been the guy to go right away, the first 2 downs. He was always going to be a third down kind of back, especially in the screen game, in the passing game. So against the Baltimore Ravens, right, that's who they're playing next, and that defense has been pretty good, especially against running backs. And Reggie Bush had a good drive in the beginning, and then he was pretty much shut out the rest of the game.
And they know how to defend the Patriots.
Exactly. So I expect Vereen to not do anything. All the running backs for New England, at that matter.
Yeah. My dud of the week is going to be Drew Brees, as you said earlier. Going against Carolina in Carolina on the grass, and Drew Brees struggles on that grass, and you've seen him struggle. He's actually been struggling a little bit lately in general. So
he struggled in the dome last week. That's how you know it's a lot of people wanted to make it a point to say y'all are crazy if you think he can't play on the road, et cetera, et cetera. This year he cannot play on the road, and it didn't even, we thought it was just the outdoors. He had a dome game last week and did bad. I mean, he's just not playing good on the road.
Period. Yeah, and I apologize for the ad, Siggy. You didn't even know, you didn't see what happened, but for some reason our little chat thing here had a little ad pop up, like right next to your face, and it made your box move. So you were pushed to the side a little bit. I had to wait till I could close the ad. It wouldn't let me close it for 5 seconds. But sorry about that, folks. But anyways, who's your Papa San? Who's your sleeper?
My sleeper's gonna be Wes Walker. A lot of people probably already gave up on him. They probably dropped him. But if you notice that Denver game last week, it was Caldwell that was getting the bulk of the action. So it looks like whenever Welker comes back, he should be the focus as far as in the offensive game plan. I think they're going to bring Wes Welker back. He's going to be healthy, coming off the concussion, and I think he's going to be the majority of the targets this week coming up, especially against Houston. So I got a feeling it's going to be a good game for Welker.
And my sleeper or Papa San of the week is going to be Bobby Rainey. And he's going against St. Louis. I know St. Louis looks tough on defense, and they will be tough on defense, but they do give up a lot of run yards. So they give up a good amount of rush yards, and Tampa Bay does not give up on the run. They didn't even give up last week against San Fran running the ball with Bobby Rainey, even though he didn't have a good game, as predicted. Excuse me, going against that San Fran defense, but still, I look for him this week to get a good amount of yards, maybe like a little bit over 100, maybe $120, and maybe a touchdown this week. So if you have him, or if he's on the waiver wire, pick him up. I doubt he's on the waiver wire because a lot of people picked him up before he blew up, but I would definitely pick him up. They rush him a lot, and he's a workhorse, so put him in, and that does it.
That does it.
This is actually our last show for the year.
It's our last show. Yeah. So
So
if you wanted something for week 17, just like I said, just keep an eye on matchups. So if you happen to have, um, you know, playoffs that go into the last week of the year, be careful with teams that already clinched playoffs. Obviously, a lot of them will start resting players. I expect teams like Denver. I expect teams like New England. I expect teams that are probably going to have the first round bye to go ahead and bench a lot of their starters. Obviously, if Manning needs to break the record, they'll probably put him in there for a quarter and a half or something. But he probably break it this week. But you got to keep an eye on those kind of things because, especially that last week, week 17, a lot of teams like to rest their players, get that extra week off, especially teams that don't have it, or even with teams that do have it, they want that extra week. So just keep an eye on that. That's probably the most important thing. And then on top of that, keep an eye on their backups or the people that are going to be playing starting because there's going to be a lot of receivers. There's going to be a lot of different kind of running backs. The Asiata and the Todman was just a tip of the iceberg because you're going to probably see teams like, let's say, New Orleans might decide to bring in somebody else. Houston probably, already knows what Ben Tate's doing. Bring the backup to him and see what he can do. So just keep an eye on that.
Yep, definitely.
Anything else?
And don't forget to tweet at us. If you need help for playoffs week 17, just tweet at us at Siggy V and at Optimus Magnum, and we should be able to help you out the best we can if you happen to have playoffs in week 17. But best of luck to you this weekend. If you're in the championship game or if you're just in a regular playoff game, good luck. Hope you win. And thanks for watching us, guys. Thanks for supporting us all year long during the fantasy football season. We'll be back next year for this. Pay attention to our other shows. We do have the fourth quarter, and we do have other sports shows in the works. So just pay attention to what we do. All right? Take care, Fantasy Football Fiends. We out. Peace.